So, the first hypothesis relates to a catastrophic flood. Proponents of this view believe that approximately 7,500 years ago, the Black Sea was separated from the world ocean and from the Marmara and Mediterranean seas by the Bosporus barrier. At that time, the water level in the Black Sea, which was then a freshwater lake, was much lower than in the world ocean. A catastrophe then occurred, likely of a geological nature, perhaps something akin to a massive earthquake. The narrow Bosporus Isthmus was destroyed. In the area of what is now the city of Istanbul, the Bosporus Strait was formed, and a powerful surge of salty seawater poured into the Black Sea basin like never before seen. If everything indeed occurred in this manner, then for the people who inhabited the current northwestern shelf of the Black Sea, it would have been a true biblical flood. Or perhaps this event was the very prototype for the biblical tale of the flood. This mystery remains ahead of us. For now, let us examine the research facts that can confirm this catastrophe, the scale of which is difficult to overestimate. Imagine a waterfall with a volume of 50 cubic kilometers per day. For comparison, the Amazon River, the most voluminous river on Earth, discharges only about 20 cubic kilometers of water into the ocean each day. Thus, according to the proposed hypothesis, from the relatively narrow Marmara Sea, the equivalent of 2.5 Amazons poured into the Black Sea basin over the course of a year. The most prominent proponents of the catastrophic Black Sea flood theory were the American researchers William Ryan and Walter Pittman from Columbia University. From their perspective, here's how the Marmara and Black Seas looked before and during the flooding. Guided by data, most of which you are already familiar with, they published a book in the late 1990s with the sensational title, Noah's Flood: The New Scientific Discoveries About the Event That Changed History. Their enthusiasm was warmly supported by oceanographer Robert Ballard. He had already gained fame for one confirmed sensation by then. In 1985, he discovered the wreckage of the Titanic at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean. Ballard investigated a hypothetical sunken settlement off the northern coast of Turkey using underwater robots. He found numerous artifacts indicating that people had lived on this seabed. However, there was no explicit confirmation that this occurred 7,500 years ago, when the rise in water levels was catastrophically fast. Nevertheless, Ballard supported the flood theory in his publications. Since then, numerous submerged settlements have been discovered in the Black Sea basin. For example, the ancient Greek port city of Acre, located at the southernmost point of the Kerch Strait. The Science TV channel produced a documentary about it titled Acre, the Crimean Atlantis. This city was abandoned by its inhabitants, seemingly all of a sudden, with almost all domestic utensils left behind. However, all this cannot confirm the theory of the Crimean flood, as Acre was inhabited from the 6th century BCE to the 4th century CE. It appears that it went underwater as a result of local tectonic processes rather than a catastrophic, wide-scale flooding event. Before the flooding of the Black Sea's shelf zones, these lands must have been highly conducive to the development of civilization. Some experts compare the conditions there to those of the Nile Valley or Mesopotamia. Numerous rivers overflowed during seasonal floods, leaving behind perfectly fertilized soil. This could have stimulated the emergence of agriculture, settled lifestyles, and the development of crafts. Understandably, a sea level rise of more than 100 meters, regardless of the speed at which it occurred, was a catastrophic event for the shelf inhabitants. Those who survived had to urgently evacuate, moving hundreds of kilometers to the northwest. Balkan archaeologists link the emergency evacuation of Black Sea tribes from the flood to the emergence of highly developed Neolithic cultures in the northwest Black Sea region, the Varna culture in Bulgaria, the Hamangia culture in Romania, and even the mysterious Vinca culture in Serbia. Can an objective connection be established between the Neolithic inhabitants of the western Black Sea region and the peoples fleeing from the bottom of the Black Sea? Underwater archaeologists are engaged with artifacts that come from beneath the thickness of the water. They are extremely active in the Black Sea because its seabed is like a giant repository where each era, each civilization, and each people have dropped something. All these artifacts remain at the bottom, and reaching them is quite challenging.
The main material that we encounter naturally is archaeological, and this primarily consists of pottery, which is most resistant to the aggressive effects of the external environment. However, as we see, there are objects that we cannot lift. These are entire architectural structures. We have not yet processed all the archaeological material, but, for instance, the 8th and 9th centuries are definitely present. We've also found coins, and more this season we discovered 2 more coins from a later period.
Underwater archaeologists find what the sea presents to them, primarily artifacts from late antiquity and the Middle Ages. And, of course, no one today has a systematic, scientifically developed plan to explore the pre-flood shores and river valleys hidden under 100 meters of water.
One hypothesis, indeed, concerns the catastrophic process of the flood, but it could also have been a process that extended over a significant period of time. Yes, that is, we cannot definitively assert anything as of now. However, during our underwater research, we occasionally find individual items, primarily stone tools from the pre-Greek period. These studies must be interdisciplinary because they require the involvement of oceanographers, paleobotanists, and archaeologists. Indeed, this is both a feasible and necessary endeavor.
Everything appears extremely logical. The Black Sea Basin neighbors the oldest foci of civilizations, Anatolia, the Near East, the Mediterranean islands, and Greece. Mesopotamia, and Egypt is not too far away either. The news of the rapid flooding of the inhabited Black Sea Basin could not have failed to spread throughout the known world, even over a few hundred years, which would be like a telegram speed for the Neolithic era. And consider how similar the resulting myths are. The biblical story of the flood is well known. It's notable that Mount Ararat, to which, according to tradition, Noah's Ark came to rest, is located not far from the Black Sea. There's a similar story in Greek mythology. For instance, the flood of Deucalion, when Deucalion and his wife Pyrrha sailed in a chest for 9 days and nights over the flooded earth and landed on Parnassus. The Sumerian legend of the flood is almost indistinguishable from the biblical one. King Ziusudra built a huge ship to save his family and all the animals. After 6 days of sailing, he moored at the peak of Nisir, as the Sumerians called Ararat. It seems that the proponents of the Black Sea flood hypothesis have found a real historical prototype for these legends. A great discovery. Is this really the case?
No, on many points. First, this flood occurred roughly in the 6th millennium BCE, whereas all the texts depicting the flood, referring to the oldest ones, date back to the 4th millennium. A more significant objection is that during excavations of cities in Mesopotamia, layers of sedimentary rocks are found that were undoubtedly deposited by flooding. Thus, the floods that could have been the real prototypes for the flood stories occurred in the historical period.
It is also worth remembering that legends of a great flood exist among nearly all peoples of the earth. There are such legends in India, China, and Central America. Finally, even Australian Aborigines, who are believed to have settled their continent about 50,000 years ago, have them. It is unlikely that they sent a messenger to find out what water invasion problems their Black Sea kin were facing. So, where did this universal mythological motif come from? Did such a flood exist that affected literally all of humanity? There is a hypothesis on this matter. The last glacial period affected almost the entire globe. And even if there was no glaciation on the land's surface, all the mountains were covered with massive glaciers, which began to melt rapidly around 12,000 years ago.
We set ourselves the task of comparing paleogeographic data with the texts of the Bible, Avesta, Rigveda, and other such sacred books. It turned out that they align and confirm each other. Thus, the data from natural sciences and the data from these, as they say, as if they were myths. It turns out that human memory reaches back quite far, 12,000 to 16,000 years, and it was preserved. This knowledge was preserved until it could be documented in writing. At that point, I proposed a hypothesis in which I did not use the term global flood as it seemed too abrupt, but rather era of extreme floodings. These floodings in total covered an area of 10 million square kilometers across northern Eurasia and had parallels in the Americas.
Thus, the interim scientific conclusion is as follows. The Black Sea flood, regardless of the speed at which it occurred, was a late part of a genuine, almost global flood that covered the Earth at the end of the last glacial period.